a theory about some diseases, like, let's just say, do you think there's a role that perhaps the mass media might play in the creation and the spread of disease like
Oh,
AIDS,
like AIDS especially.
breast cancer?
Um,
Let's talk about that.
okay, AIDS. AIDS is thought of as you got it, you drop dead. That's not true. And I've seen the realities of that. I think it was back in 1981 or 1982, I was working with Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, and at the time we worked on an individual who was a teacher at Stanford and had AIDS, probably the worst case that I've ever seen. Lesions all over the body, big. If you've never seen AIDS, it's not a pretty thing to look at. And back then, there was only like, I don't know, less than 100 in some cases, I think. Maybe there was more than 100, but I'm just talking about the United States. So it was a relatively brand new disease. Doctors wouldn't touch it. It was a draw a picture on a piece of paper, wear rubber gloves, the whole 9 yards. When I was introduced to this individual, for the first time in my healing career, I was scared. And because I can see the energy. I'm really clairvoyant, and I could see the energy that was coming off the body. I stepped outside the room, and I did my usual thing. I went straight to God. When in doubt, go to God. And so I went to God. I said, look, God, you want me to go in there and work on you, I will. But as you can look at my essence, I'm scared. And I don't think that's a good format to go in there with. So you make the decision, I'll follow through on it. And the next thing I know, complete peace and calm came over my body. And I took that as a pretty good sign from God to go in there and do your work, Dennis. You're a healer, act like it. So I went inside, and I started to work on the individual. I was probably then the first human being that touched it, and it was open lesions, and there was blood, and there was sores. Now, I'm a hands-on healer, so I just put my hands on it. At the time, I didn't know it was spread that way. I didn't know it was spread through the blood. But on the other hand, I trusted God. And I knew God would protect me. It was sort of like, if you ever heard the story about when people used to get leprosy, because that's also another cured thing. There was a priest who worked on the island. Nobody was afraid. Everybody was frightened to work there. And so the priest asked God that nobody would get sick that worked with the lepers. And since then, nobody has ever gotten sick. And I believe that God allows us the free will to decide if we should get sick from doing this or not. So I went in, I worked on the individual, I laid hands on. That was in 81, this is 93. I have no trace of the virus or any of that. I just believe God protected me. That particular person died, but the results were real unique. All the chemicals and stuff that they were using on him, I healed one half of the body, and they injected him with the chemicals anyhow. The half of the body that I worked on, the lesions got smaller, the body started to heal, but the other half that I hadn't worked on got worse and the person died. I worked on 2 more people after that. Both are still alive, and neither one have a trace of the virus at all. So when the universe and myself worked, we're 2 for 3. First one was practice, I'm sure, to get over the initial shock. I think when the mass media comes out and says you're going to die, the consciousness of the planet buys into that. Here you are as this person who's sick, and you got the rest of the world telling you that you're going to drop dead. Not only do you have to recover for yourself, you've got to recover for the other 6 billion people who all are expecting you to drop dead. That's a real challenge. I think the media hurts diseases. I think the media, in all of its wanting to do good, sometimes does the opposite. Not that the media is right or wrong. Their job is, to be spectacular. Their job is to sell. That's what they do. We all know how the media can get after a person and just take control. That's their job. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it is what gets done. It's how things get handled. So now we've got this belief structure that AIDS will kill you. I mean, I hear different people all around the country who beat it. So I think that if, TV was really on it, they'd go out there and say, hey, there's a couple people that have beaten this. And by saying that, that would encourage a lot of people who are sick, rather than throwing in the towel, to fight it through, to be true to themselves. I mean, once people think they have AIDS, it's just a downhill shot, because the life source, the wind, is knocked out of your sails, because nobody's there saying you can do it.
Let's just say we have someone listening who might benefit from having a greater understanding about this disease or some other incurable disease. What would you say to them in words of encouragement, or what kind of thought form do we need to have in order to heal?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't believe in what everybody else tells me, even though that's the first thing that hits you. Inside your mind, it's going to say, oh, whoa, I'm doomed. Well, what about God? Did you forget about that? Why don't you ask God for some help? There's a rumor that if you ask, you should receive. Well, let's just say, rather than go for the healing right off the bat, why don't you ask God for some strength? Why don't you ask God for like a backup system of friends or relatives that would be there in your corner who are positive thinkers? Come on, positive thinking always works. You can go to any bookstore, read enough material on that. Start to read that positive material. Check around in newspapers. I mean, there's this one magazine I'm looking at. They're giving an interview with an individual who cured himself in Milwaukee. Find the newspaper clips that say this person healed their AIDS or this person cured that. And then by reading that, you as a personality will become more encouraged. If I can encourage you, hey, I don't think the disease can kill you. I think you kill yourself. I think you throw in the towel too soon. I think it all comes from guilt. Now they're saying, well, it's not only just the gay community now that it's in the blood. Well, hey, you know, it's still coming from the guilt. Now, this is metaphysical, and I know there's some kids who had blood transfusions, and people will say, well, hey, how could this kid come from guilt? He doesn't really even know about guilt. That's true. But if you're in metaphysics, you also heard about reincarnation. And maybe you just chose to learn this particular symptom of AIDS and died at an early age, so you didn't have to go through a whole long time worth of life living and get all bummed out about it. You could, you know, show up in a new life, handle it right away, get out, come back, job's done. Next life you come back, you're ready to be like an immortalist. Who knows? But it's like, there's a lot of ways to look at it. Never throw the towel in. Don't ever accept somebody else's reality, because haven't you ever heard of the exception to the rule? It's always there. And what makes you think you ain't it?
I'd like to talk about what your reality is like. And do you have any gurus of your own, or people that you respect and admire? Teachers?
Wow, loaded question. I respect every human being on the planet. And I believe every human being on the planet is a teacher, because I think everybody has one little tiny piece that nobody else has. And so in terms of respect, I respect all human life. I've also listened to some of the stuff about nothing greater than or less than, so I don't have any teachers per se. I studied with the best, and there are tons of them. What is my reality like? Because I respect myself and others and can see the God in everybody, I find that I live a very happy life. That doesn't mean I don't have my up days and my down days like every other human being, but I've noticed that if I have a tremendously down day, I don't stand around and beat myself up for it. I don't get down on my back and make this particular experience really unbearable. I also notice that when I have an up day, I don't exemplify it. I don't make a big deal out of it either. I stay in neutral over everything. By staying in neutral, I've discovered then negative days don't bother you, positive days don't bother you. You're at just like a really nice space. There's always a smile. You're always in the present moment. You're always clear. And there's that knowing that you and God are a lot closer than most people are aware of. So that's kind of it. I respect all things.